Hello, my name is John Fowler. I am a safety manager with National Exploration Wells and Pumps. I'm today doing an industry connected video about fatigue, about controlling the commute, and then a little bit about mental health, which are all things that we deal with working either on a pump rig or on a drill rig. So fatigue is a state of tiredness leading to reduced mental and/or physical performance that can endanger workplace safety. Is that something that we deal with? Absolutely. This is something that we deal with all the time. We're working long hours, oftentimes away. And what we need to understand about fatigue is that there's something called the circadian rhythm, which is something that's sort of above us and something that we can't really control. So the circadian rhythm is the rhythm that your body naturally goes through as it goes through the day. For most of human history, we slept at night. And because of that, our bodies developed to where at nighttime, the alertness would go down, the energy would go down, and just naturally, our bodies are basically going to sleep. This slide right here is a slide of the circadian rhythm. And you can see, and if you look at the left of the screen, you can see, or left of the slide, you can see that at noon, we have pretty good alertness, and then it falls down throughout the afternoon. In fact, right about now, when I'm talking to you, 2, 3 o'clock, my body is naturally getting less alert. So I guess it's a very good time for me to talk about fatigue and the circadian rhythm. Now, there are a lot of countries out there where in the afternoon, they will take a siesta. The whole country will actually shut down. People will go take a nap because they have recognized that in the afternoon, your body is naturally not going to be as alert. Now, the crazy thing is places like Spain that do this, then they go and they have dinner at like 11 o'clock because they've shifted their whole entire sleep schedule. But it's important we understand what's going on with our bodies. So once again, as you can see here, about 3 o'clock, their alertness goes down. Then it starts to build, starts to go up. We get more and more alert. And you can see this in real time. In fact, if you look at Olympic records, the majority of Olympic records are done in the afternoon, evening of that person's circadian rhythm. So you can actually look at when people are at their very best, and it matches right up to the circadian rhythm. So it builds up in about 9, 10 o'clock at night, and then it starts to come down, which makes a lot of sense because that's when we're asleep. And it comes down, down, down till about 5, 6 a.m. And around 5 and 6 a.m. is really one of the most hazardous times to be awake and doing things because your alertness is at the very bottom of the chart. And then obviously once you wake up, it comes up again. Now, of course, the question is, well, what can we do about this? Well, there's not a whole lot. We can drink coffee, we can do things like that, but this is the schedule, this is the rhythm that our body is naturally going to be going through. Now, a lot of people out there think that you can just drink a whole lot of energy drinks. I am not a doctor, but I can tell you that there's a lot of commercial and industrial sites out there which are now banning energy drinks. And what I mean by that is if they go through your cooler and they find rock stars, monsters, things like that, they will count that as like you having alcohol on site. Now, I am not saying that you can't use those. I'm not saying that you shouldn't use those, but I can tell you that there's been a lot of health issues related to energy drinks. So just relying on energy drinks is really not a good way to combat fatigue and to combat the circadian rhythm. Your circadian rhythm is going to affect your alertness really regardless of how much caffeine you've had or not. So that's the fatigue and the circadian rhythm or alertness are really two separate things. So what we need to do in this industry is realize that in the afternoon around 2 and 3 o'clock, and also in the morning, 4, 5, 6 a.m., that our alertness is at the very bottom of the chart. And we need to say to ourselves, you know what? If I'm doing something at those times, I need to take a second. I need to step back and really think it through and make sure that I haven't missed any steps because we just aren't as alert as we normally are. And not only has this been shown when it comes to Olympic athletes, but it's also been shown when it comes to industrial accidents. There have been a handful of major industrial accidents which have been directly linked to fatigue. And one of the most famous ones is Chernobyl. And we've all heard a lot about Chernobyl these days. But Chernobyl nuclear reactor in Ukraine. At the time, it was part of the Soviet Union. And in 1986, at 1:23 a.m., they had a meltdown. There was an explosion, several hundred people were killed, massive spread of radiation. But one of the contributing factors, one of the main contributing factors, was that it was 1:23 a.m. and on your circadian rhythm chart, your alertness is going way down at 1:23 a.m. But there were a lot of things going on, and the operator of the plant just could not handle all of them. And next thing you know, there was an explosion. So 100% Chernobyl was linked to fatigue. Another one was something that probably a lot of you have heard about, which was the Exxon Valdez. The Exxon Valdez before struck a reef out off the coast of Alaska and spilled 11 million gallons. When they went back and looked at that, there were definitely a couple things going on. But one of the things is that the mate at the controls had only had, I think, like a 20-minute nap in 16, 17 hours. So he definitely said that fatigue was a contributing factor. And then more recently, in 2005, in Texas City, Texas, there was a massive oil refinery explosion. And in that case, there were 15 killed and 180 injured. And they went back and looked at that, and they found that the guys that were in the control room when this happened, they had been going for 29, 30 consecutive days of 12-hour shifts. So without a doubt, fatigue played a role in that. So we can see not only with, like I said, Olympians and their performance, but also in industry itself, that we have to pay attention to our circadian rhythm. So we have to understand that if we're in the afternoon, that we need to pay attention, and especially at night, if we're working night shift, we need to pay attention. So what are some of the symptoms of fatigue? Well, if you are getting fatigued, well, one of the things you're going to start doing is craving sugar and carbs. That's why I guess there's that joke about everybody wants donuts when they're all, when those early morning meetings when everybody wants donuts. That's because if you're throwing off your sleep schedule and you're fatigued, one of the big things you're going to be looking for is sugar, making sure you're getting your sugar and carbs. It's harder to stop eating if you're fatigued. So if you're tired, your body is trying to make up for the lack of energy by getting food and getting carbs and giving sugar to basically give yourself an energy boost. You're also more clumsy. One night of sleep gives you the same hand-eye coordination as someone who's legally intoxicated. So if you miss an entire night of sleep, you have the same hand-eye coordination for somebody who's drunk. It's just that is all it takes to really start messing up your body when it comes to fatigue. You also look older, and that's because when you're sleeping, your body does a lot of repair work to itself, repair work to its cells, and actually makes you look younger. And then also, if you're fatigued, you get sick more easily. Now, there are numbers out there saying that 30% of the country is chronically fatigued. I will also at this point, I should also mention that OSHA has a very good informational section and a couple bulletins and papers on fatigue on the OSHA.gov website. So if you just go into OSHA.gov and search for fatigue, they've got some really good information on fatigue. They talk about, what causes fatigue. They talk about shift work, and they just have some good sort of tips and pointers on things that you can do to kind of make it better for the people that are out there actually doing the shift work. But some of the stats from OSHA that I did get right from the OSHA website are that the accident injury rates are 18% greater during evening shifts and 30% greater during night shifts. So without a doubt, you can see a spike in accidents and injuries when you start doing that late night work. And also, working 12 hours a day is associated with a 37% increase in the risk of injury. So without a doubt, when we are working long shifts, when we're working into the night, we really need to step back. We need to think about our circadian rhythm. We need to think about what our bodies are doing and just realize that, I might have had a couple cups of coffee, but I might feel awake, but my body is just not as alert as it should be. And we really need to step back and, take a second and make sure that we've thought through whatever the task is that we're doing. Now, this also affects us when we drive, because usually it's those early morning hours and those late evening hours when we are driving back and forth to the drill site. And really, when it comes to fatigue, being on the road is one of the most hazardous things that we do. And actually, that's not just true for fatigue, just in general, being on the roads is one of the most hazardous activities of our day. Now, I looked up some stats from the National Safety Council, and they said that 40% of drivers admit to falling asleep while driving. So 40% of the drivers out there admit to actually falling asleep while they're driving. And I also looked up the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration, and they said that last year there were over 90,000 crashes on the highway involving fatigue. Of those 90,000 crashes, 50,000 of them involved an injury, and there are 800 fatalities associated with fatigue driving. So when we are on the highways, we really need to pay attention to what we're doing out there. And I'm going to give you some tips on sort of how we can handle fatigue, how we can get better sleep, and things that we can do while we're driving. So as far as things that we can do while we're driving, probably a lot of you have heard the, I really should call them myths, that if you're tired and you're driving, you should open the window, you should scream, you should turn on the heat, or you turn on the AC, basically do something to kind of shock yourself. Well, those are just that. They're just myths. Those different activities are only going to work for about, I don't know, maybe a minute if you're lucky. Really, when it comes down to managing your fatigue when you're driving, if you are driving and you feel tired, the only thing that is going to correct that is for you to stop and take an actual nap. Now, when I say a nap, I don't mean you have to kick the seat back and take an hour and a half long nap or something like that. If you just take a 5, 6, 7 minute power nap, it'll take the edge off, and you'll be able to go another hour, hour and a half, something like that before you get tired again. But if you feel your eyelids getting tired, either switch drivers. If there's somebody else in the vehicle who's awake, that's absolutely the time to switch drivers. Or if you're in there all by yourself, the best thing to do is to pull over and just take a nap. Take a short nap, and that'll re-energize you. But if you keep fighting through and keep trying to, there's a really good chance that bad things are going to happen. So it's really important that when we're driving down the roads that we pay attention to that. Now, really, when we're talking about fatigue, it all comes down to sleep. So when we're sleeping, our body is doing a couple different things. Our body is both fixing the body, in other words, repairing cell damage and that kind of thing. But we're also clearing out our brain, and we're actually getting ourselves ready for the next day. It's really interesting because there's been that expression that I'm sure everyone's heard where you wake up and you feel clear-headed. Well, that's actually a very, very good expression, because one of the things that happens while you sleep is that your brain actually is flushed out. Now, I want to make it clear, by no means am I a doctor, but I will go through and talk to you guys a little bit about what happens when you sleep, because it's important to understand that. So, like I said, when you sleep, different things are going on. You go through several different cycles. So you can see here, this is just a good example of the sleep cycle. And you can see that there's different phases that you go through. You go through phases where your body's being repaired, and you go through phases where your brain is being cleared out. Now, at first, you start off, you can see you're falling asleep, then your heart rate starts to slow, your brain does less, and then your body starts making repairs. Like I say, you're repairing cells, you're repairing any kind of damage that's happened during the day. Then your body temperature keeps going down. Then you start getting into that eye movement phase. This is very interesting. Once again, I'm not a doctor, but your spinal fluid, when you're sleeping in those deep cycles, your spinal fluid will actually come up into your brain and will actually flush away a lot of the chemicals that have built up during the day. Here's a little chart of your sleep cycles. So you can see that as the night goes on, your sleep cycles are actually getting longer and wider as they go on. I should say they're getting wider and wider as they go on. So as you're sleeping, your body keeps going between these phases where it's repairing cells to where it's flushing out your brain. I know that's a weird way of explaining it, but when you think, your brain is having both electrical signals, communicating both electrical signals, but also communicating chemically. And you build up a lot of those chemicals throughout the day, And then at night, your spinal fluid will actually come up into your brain and actually kind of flush it out, get you ready for the next day so that when you wake up, you are clear-headed. You don't have anything left over from the day before. If you look at this chart too, you can see that really 7 hours is the best one to shoot for. That's the amount of sleep that you should shoot for every night. Now, different people do have different requirements as far as what they need for sleep. There are some people out there who don't need a lot of sleep, and there are also some people out there who need more sleep. So it's important to really get a handle on how much sleep that you need. But really, 7 hours is the average, and that's what the vast majority of people need in order to feel rested. And it's kind of interesting because you can tell where you are in those sleep cycles by the way you wake up. Like if you wake up and you're refreshed, it means that you're up at the top of one of those sleep cycles, right? Sort of in and out of consciousness. And that's the best time for you to wake up. If you've ever woken up and been confused about where you are, you wake up in like a hotel room or even at home, and for a second there, you don't know what's going on, where you are. That's because you've woken up in one of those deep cycles when your brain is basically getting flushed out. So the key is to shoot for that 7 hours so that after 7 hours, you've gotten the appropriate amount of cycles. And when you wake up, you're good to go. Now, of course, it's easy for me to sit here and say, oh, you got to get your sleep. Well, that's a lot easier said than done. So I wanted to give you all some tips on ways to go to sleep. I know a lot of people don't work shift work. There are people that do, so I'm gonna kind of touch on both of those. So really the most important thing you can do in order to make sure you're getting your sleep at night is be regular. Set a regular sleep schedule. Now, I know that can be hard, especially with young kids, especially with things that you have going on at home, but you want to set it up so that you're going to bed at the same time every night. If you keep changing around your going to bed time, your body is going to be all messed up and you're not going to be able to fall into that sleep and get that same kind of regular sleep. So regularity is the key. It's hard on night shift. It's going to take you a couple days to really get your feet under you if you're working a night shift kind of rotation. But even on night shift, if you're going to bed at 8 in the morning because you've been up all night, that kind of thing, then go to bed at 8 in the morning. Do everything in your power to make sure you're as regular as possible when it comes to when you go to sleep. Also, you want to darken your room. And that might seem like a no-brainer. Yeah, I want to sleep in the dark. But when I say darken your room, I mean darken it. There should be no light coming through any of the shades. I know that when I traveled, I used to be a driller on a rig, and when I was on night shift, I would bring clothespins with me, and I would use the clothespins to make sure that the shades in the room are closed. Because I don't know what it is about hotel and motel rooms, but their shades never seem to fully close. There's always like a little gap going right down the middle. So I always like to bring some clothespins and actually use those to keep those shades closed. Because it's not just our eyes that sense the light, it's our skin as well. So you could be laying there with your head in total darkness, but if there are rays of sun coming through a crack that's hitting your skin, it's actually telling your body, hey, it's time to get up. It's time to wake up. And what that is melatonin. So when it's dark, your body starts releasing melatonin. And melatonin is telling you, hey, it's time to go to bed, time to go to sleep. So as soon as your skin or eyes see light, you stop releasing melatonin, and then, oh, now it's time to get up. Something else you want to do is stay away from screens. And this is probably one of the most difficult ones. Screens give off blue light. Now there's a lot of sleep modes now you can see on phones and whatnot, but screens give off blue light. And blue light is telling your body the same thing that sunshine is, which is, hey, it's time to get up. So the recommendation is to actually get off screens for an hour before bed. Now that might be difficult for some people. They do make glasses that you can wear that actually will filter out the blue light. So I do know people that have those glasses, and that way they'll put on the glasses before they go to bed. That way they're not being bombarded by all that blue light. But that blue light from phones, from TVs, definitely is going to interfere with your sleep and with the quality of your sleep. Another thing you want to look at is the actual temperature. 68 degrees is the best temperature because your body and your brain actually cools off when you go to bed. So if you can set that thermostat for 68 degrees, it will help you go to sleep. That's one of those reasons why it's so hard to fall asleep when it's hot, because your body is actually trying to cool off. You want to avoid alcohol and caffeine. I'm sure that's kind of a no-brainer. Yes, alcohol will help you go to sleep for sure. If you drink maybe too much of it, it might help you go to sleep. But the sleep that you're going to get is not good sleep. That interferes with your cycles. And yes, you may actually be asleep, but you're not getting those nice big cycles the way you would normally without the alcohol. And then the last one is don't stay awake in bed. What I mean by that is if you are tossing and turning in bed and it's been more than 20 minutes, you should get out of bed, go do something else for a little while, and then try to go back to bed again. You want to make sure that when you go to bed, that your body knows that when you're in bed, it's time to go to sleep. That's why it's really not a good idea to lay in bed and watch TV and lay in bed and surf on a computer or whatever else people do. You really want to set it up so that when you get in bed, your body says, oh, okay, I'm in bed, it's time to go to sleep. So you're basically training your body. So once again, those are some of the tips for getting some sleep. This country, probably a lot of the world, in fact, is chronically fatigued. So it really is important that we're all out there doing everything we can to get sleep. And once again, I know there's people out there who say, well, I don't really need that much sleep. Well, there are people who don't need as much sleep, but they are a very small percentage. So the odds are that even though you might think you don't need a lot of sleep, you actually do, and you may be fatigued yourself. So we're working around equipment. We're definitely working in a hazardous environment. It's important that we are as alert as possible out there. So pay attention to your circadian rhythm. If it's, like I said, the afternoon, 2, 3 o'clock, if it's the morning time, 4, 5, 6 a.m., remind yourself, you know what, my body is just not alert as possible. I really need to think through all this maybe 2 or 3 times, and then make sure not to add on top to your circadian rhythm. Don't add on to it the fact that you're fatigued, because obviously you have your circadian rhythm that's going along in the background all the time. You don't want to add on to it the fact that you're fatigued. So try to get as much sleep as you can at night. Use those tips and get a good solid night's sleep. Now, something else, and the last thing I want to talk about is mental health. And I want to make it clear again, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a psychiatrist, but I just want to talk about some of the issues that we deal with when we're working long hours, and especially when we're working away from home. So this is just a little slide that I use when I talk to my new hires, when I'm giving them new hire training. But it kind of talks about the different stages of mental injury. So what I'm talking about here is how we should look at ourselves and kind of do a self-evaluation to make sure that we have everything under control. So if you see in that little slide right there, when you're healthy, life is good. I mean, when you're healthy, you have normal fluctuations in moods, you're sleeping well, you've got energy, you're socially active, life is good. But as more fatigue, but also more stress is started to get introduced into your life, things start to change, and things start to change mentally. If you look on that, when you go into the yellow, the reacting, now all of a sudden, if you notice, your moods start to change. Maybe a little nervous, irritable, you have a little bit of trouble sleeping, decreased social activity. The key here is that if you see yourself starting to slide along the scale, you need to identify what's going on and take care of it. Because as you can imagine, the further and further to the right we slide on this scale, the worse things happen. I can tell you that I had some things going on, and I found myself snapping at my kids, and I don't normally snap at my kids. And I actually did take a step back and say to myself, you know what, me snapping just right off the bat, snapping at my kids, that is not a normal thing. And so I took a step back and I really thought about what was going on that was causing this, and then I dealt with it. But the key to that is that I saw myself starting to slide along this frame right here. Now, once you start getting into the red, injured, now all of a sudden you really start perhaps getting angry. You're not sleeping well at all. But really one of the big indicators is that social avoidance or withdrawal. Now, if you're working with the same group of people day after day and you don't want to go out to dinner with them because you just spent 12 hours of your life with them on a rig or a pump rig or whatever, I'm not saying that's social avoidance. Social avoidance is more like you've got a wife calling, you don't want to talk to your wife, maybe your girlfriend, maybe family member. Like you really just, I don't want to deal with any of that. If you start finding yourself being like, you know what, I just can't deal with this. I just don't want to talk to these people. That right there might be an indicator that something's going on in your life that's perhaps giving you too much stress. Maybe you're a little bit too fatigued and you really need to identify what it is because as I've said, the further and further you slide along this, the worse things happen. But really, just look at yourself as far as what your mood is. So these are really what I've found are the key indicators. So just look at it. What kind of mood are you in? Is your mood bouncing all over the place? Have you suddenly started snapping at people for no reason? Or do you just suddenly get really, really angry for no reason? Those there are indicators that there's something going on in your life, which is adding a lot of extra stress, and you need to take care of it. Just by being on the road, just by working long hours and being away from home, maybe working out of the town, maybe even working out of state, all of those things by themselves are enough to put you into that yellow. So we really, in this industry, we really need to work hard on identifying where we are mentally and making sure that if we see that all these stresses are piling up, that a way to take care of that. Because like I said, we don't want to keep going down that slide. So that's what I want to talk to about today with fatigue and with driving to and from work and a little bit of mental health. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got something out of it. And if anyone ever has any questions, I'm always happy to answer questions. Thank you.